Vietnam War was a long and costly attempt by the United States to halt the spread of communism in Vietnam. It began as a proxy war in which the United States backed the French forces who were fighting for their claim for Vietnam in the south. While France occupied southern Vietnam, the Viet Minh government, led by Ho Chi Minh, occupied the north. Eventually, after facing massive losses in the war against the Viet Minh, France decided to back out of the war. A compromise was reached at the Geneva Conference of 1954. The agreement was that Vietnam would temporarily be divided along the 17th parallel. However, America refused to agree to these terms and assisted Ngo Dinh Diem in becoming the new leader of South Vietnam, therefore continuing the war against communism through yet another country. This caused the 17th parallel to be the new divide for which the war between North and South Vietnam would be fought. However, North Vietnam also had an ally in the south, the Viet Cong. The Viet Cong received sufficient military supplies from the north and used guerrilla warfare tactics to help weaken and frustrate the US-backed South Vietnamese army. This is a major reason for the massive US bombing campaign nicknamed Rolling Thunder, in which the original goal of the bombings were to demoralize the North and undermine the Northern government's ability to rule. On August 4, 1964, after the Gulf of Tonkin incident, where reportedly the Vietnamese shot down 2 US boats, President Johnson took immediate action and began bombing in retaliation to these attacks, one of which turned out to be mistakenly reported.
But repeated acts of violence against the armed forces of the United States must be met not only with alert defense, but with positive reply. That reply is being given as I speak to you tonight. Air action is now in execution against gunboats and certain supporting facilities in North Vietnam, which have been used in these hostile operations.
Once President Johnson began Operation Rolling Thunder, many Air Force pilots began going on frequent bombing raids.
You had to stay alert because the aircraft going up had a mission to stay closer to the zone between North and South Vietnam or Vietnam and Cambodia. You had to stay alert for guys coming back with empty airplanes. So they were going back and you were going up. And we were flying 24 hours a day. Dark missions, sometimes no moon. It's hard to stay alert a long way. Ships, they usually goes out and sometimes you'd lose the first ship or he'd get shot up and have to take off himself and start back to the base. And we'd keep on going because we were loaded down with missions and you couldn't turn around and go back with a couple of 1,000 pounds hanging on your wings. That was pretty dangerous to try and land with that. So one guy maybe got shot up on the first pass, he goes back home, and then second guy in line takes over the 3 ship. You're down to 3. So you go ahead and work your mission. And in the mission you got ground controllers that are circling, like in a Cessna or something, at about 2,000 feet usually, around the target. And he directs you into a lot of the targets.
Operation Thunder quickly failed in meeting its 2 main goals. Some of this was due to the restrictions on what the US could bomb out of fear of provoking a Soviet or Chinese military response. After the initial failure to undermine the North Vietnamese government, the US changed its strategy towards bombing the supply lines from North to South Vietnam in order to weaken the Viet Cong, all the while continuing attacks aimed towards weakening the Viet Minh government. These bombing raids continued to go on for the next 3 years. In these few years, the Vietnamese were able to assemble one of the strongest air defenses in the world at this time. Although North Vietnam did not have a strong air force, with Chinese and Soviet help, they set up a sophisticated air defense system from the ground that used ground-to-air missiles and artillery to defend against the American bombings. It was not rare that a US fighter jet would get shot down while executing a bombing. Felix Summers received multiple awards, one being for bravely jumping out of a flaming jet and evading enemy ground troops in time to be rescued.
Nothing to kill or die for.
down, and it was a afternoon, usual afternoon. And clouds covering the countryside. But anyway, we went in and tried to hit some weapon stumps. Two of us, so we get up the usual 5,000 feet. If you're at nighttime or something, you got up 10. I say up to, you go up 20 and come down to 10 and work your mission like that. You go in one at a time, so you wouldn't run into each other. Mm-hmm. But this was daytime, afternoon, and we went in. I guess we were maybe 1,500 feet scooting around the smaller mountains, but you did that to stay out of the way of any portable machine guns, or like truck mounted guns. Mm-hmm. So we went in and dropped our stuff, then we went back in. We went back down to the last one, and we got machine guns from the ground. So we got a firelight, warning came off, and we were by then pulling off the target. And we pulled up that way and said we were hit and started for Saigon. Then our flight partner joined up with us. First thing he does is look you over to see what you got hit. See if you can land when you get back, basically. See if you can make it to your back. When we started off target, you can still see back this way and see where the ground troops, the smoke that was coming up. We came off, he joined up, and just a minute or so after that he said, "You're smoking," out to the wheel well. And then the wheel blew down just by itself. So we had pretty good training to what to do. Mm-hmm. And so about that time we said, okay, I don't think we're going to get anywhere. The fire's getting worse and we're getting hot to climb. So we climbed up about 5,000 feet, so we had a good chance of the chutes working. And we were as close to the border as we were going to get. I said, we better go now. And I went first, that's the way we had set up, and my pilot went second. And we came down a rubber plantation and a swamp. The other guy in my plane dropped in the swamp, and I dropped in the rubber plantation. So I hear them coming, and also two of them rode up in a motorbike. But this was before I looked around and finally the only thing I could find was to lay down behind a small rubber tree, see if I could hide, until the army got there. I stayed down there a couple hours, and it got to be pretty much a game show time down there. Here, I could hear the army coming. They were talking to each other, and they had about 7, 8, 10 helicopters coming. Wow. Looking for us. And we were in a smoke spot with a smoke bomb. Not bomb, but just marker smokes. And one was green, I remember that, and one was some other color. So the crewman had told me there was a couple of guys looking for me down there. And finally one of them came running through that smoke. And I had my gun out. And now you decide what you're going to do. You don't wait till somebody shoots at you. Well, I was all set to. And I just didn't want to shoot that guy because he didn't look like a soldier. Mm-hmm. He didn't be a soldier. I didn't shoot him, and it turned out he was a Vietnamese farmer from that village that was conducting that. But I think we were both happy that we didn't do that. So we, together, the two of us got the helicopter, got out of that smoke, and they could see us. And they put us both in there, took us over the village, and they let the guy out there.
But I'm not the only one.
Altogether, the U.S. bombing campaign was a failure. It seemed to hurt the U.S. more than it hurt the North Vietnamese. With the $300 million of damage sustained by North Vietnam, the USA had to spend $900 million to fund the attacks. Operation Rolling Thunder did not only hurt America economically, but it also lowered the American morale towards the war, and it largely assisted in the anti-war effort. Vietnam was a momentous time in U.S. history because with it came the largest anti-war movement America had seen yet. The movement began with peaceful demonstrations and grew quickly as the government poured more and more troops into the country. Eventually, with no support from the American public and with no foreseeable end to the war, the United States worked out a settlement for U.S. troops to be peacefully withdrawn from Vietnam. Vietnam then became a unified country under control of the North Vietnamese government.